This week on Worldview, is the Adani indictment in the US a case of American overreach, or is it a real blow for India's image, with Kenya, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh ordering contract reviews and the group's global infrastructure and energy imprint? What's the diplomatic impact of the US action on India and other countries? Hello and welcome to Worldview at The Hindu with me, Suhasini Haidar. Now, it's been more than a week since the US Department of Justice, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, issued indictments charging the Adani Group, its top leadership, including Gautam Adani, of a conspiracy to bribe Indian government officials for contracts and for defrauding the US investor by raising capital through bond issues for that. Remember, these are indictments. They still need to go through a trial process, and only if there's a conviction will the case itself go forward. There's also the possibility of the Adani Group paying fines and settling that case. The Adani Group has denied the charges, 5 counts in all, naming various Adani Group officials in India and the US, and it says it will take legal recourse. The links to this entire case are below. You can also see several explainers at www.thehindu.com. But what we are looking at more closely on Worldview is 3 questions. What's the impact of the Adani indictment on India-US ties? What's the impact of the indictment on ties with other countries, India's ties with other countries? And what does this mean for India's investment diplomacy and its image globally? So to begin with that first question on India-US ties, certainly the government's response so far, or the initial response, really has been silence. The explanation being that this is a private company. It's not connected with the government.
See, we see this as a legal matter involving private firms and individuals and the US Department of Justice. Obviously, there are established procedures and legal avenues in such cases which we believe will follow, would be followed. And the government of India, so far, we have not, to answer your question, we have not been informed in advance on the issue. We haven't had any conversation also on this particular matter with the US government.
Remember last year, in 2023, the Ministry of External Affairs had not responded to a series of allegations against the Adani Group by US short seller and market research company Hindenburg Research. Either the External Affairs Minister and some other ministers had spoken out, but an official response was really silence. An Adani Group official at the time had alleged an international conspiracy to defame India. He even stood in front of the national tricolour, the flag, while saying it. However, this time, it is the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the Securities Exchange Commission, all official US bodies, making the allegation. And that probably requires a response at a more official level. Secondly, along with the FBI and the DOJ's investigation into the Panun assassination plot of the case, the timing of the indictments of Adani appear to have some political significance, given that a new administration, the Trump administration, will come into place on January the 20th and change most of the top prosecuting officials in both cases. So the question really is the Biden White House jumping the gun on these indictments, expecting that a Trump administration may not take them as seriously. That remains to be seen. Here's what the US White House said when asked about the 2 cases.
So obviously we're aware of these allegations, and I would have to refer you to the SEC and DOJ about the specifics of those allegations against the Adani Group. What I will say is on the U.S. and India relationship, we believe that it's stands on an extremely strong foundation, anchored in ties between our people and cooperation across a full range of global issues. And so what we believe and we're confident about is that we'll continue to navigate this issue.
There is also the question of general US double standards and overreach, given that the indictment is for alleged bribes paid in India to Indian officials. But that is according to the US's own laws on foreign corrupt practices. With warm personal ties with Prime Minister Modi and a planned visit by US President President-elect Donald Trump to India for the Quad summit next year, the government is not likely to worry about impact on other aspects of bilateral ties. However, the company itself, the Adani Group itself, will not be able to raise funds in the US, nor will it have recourse to US government grants like the Development Financing Corporation loan of the US government for the Colombo port, for example. So for the foreseeable future, that's going to be an issue, and this may impact India-US projects in the following areas, and there may be more. One, the routing of funds for climate change transition from the US may be impacted given the Adani Group's dominance of solar power projects in particular. Secondly, cooperation for high-tech and defense deals, both of which involve the Adani Group, may be in some trouble. And thirdly, infrastructure projects in other countries where India-US are cooperating as a kind of +1 factor, like the one in Sri Lanka, could be impacted. What about ties between India and other countries? The first impact was really seen in Kenya, where President Ruto cancelled contracts for an energy plant and spoke about an airport project as well, with the Adanis in trouble. In Sri Lanka, the government announced that it has a review going on by the Ministry of Finance and Foreign Affairs looking into the Adani projects. And the main one is, of course, for a terminal at Colombo Port, the CWIT, as well as wind energy. In fact, in responses to the Hindu, the DFC, this is the US's aid and financing arm, Development Finance Corporation arm, said it is now, quote unquote, assessing the situation, hasn't dispersed any of the $553 million project it had promised a year ago. In Bangladesh, the courts ordered an inquiry, and after that, the government set up a panel to look into charges of overcharging and corruption into the Adani Power agreement to supply power from a plant in Goda in Jharkhand, which was done with the previous Hasina government. Then in France, energy major Total said it was holding any further investment into its LNG venture with Adani called Adani Total Gas. Governments in countries like Tanzania, where Adani is developing a container terminal, Israel, where Adani Ports runs a terminal in Haifa, have said, however, that they will continue with those projects. So no problems there. But remember that Indian economic operations of this kind have already been affected quite a lot by geopolitics, including, of course, for the Adani Group itself, which is involved in so many areas. One of them, of course, Russia's war in Ukraine has meant sanctions against about 30 Indian companies. We've been tracking that story so far. Also, the sanctions on oil and other things. Israel's war in Gaza has affected the IMEC project and the I2U2 that work with the Haifa port. Iran-US tensions have meant India lost a major supplier of oil due to sanctions, also Venezuelan oil. Sanctions on Myanmar have stopped infrastructure projects. Government changes in Maldives, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka have put Indian projects over there, all under the scanner. So all of these changes geopolitically have an impact. What is the latest the indictment of the Adanis have as in terms of impact on India's diplomacy and, of course, in terms of India's image globally? To begin with, US charges will no doubt cause reputational damage when it comes to integrated and allied economies to the US in North America and Europe. Secondly, Adani investments and projects have been closely aligned with the Modi government's own foreign policy forays, priorities in infrastructure development and energy, both in fact thermal as well as green power, coal as well as hydropower and solar power, with projects in Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Kazakhstan, discussions that started with Indonesia, Vietnam, Greece. All of them followed closely on high-level meetings with Prime Minister Modi, his visits there or hosting leaders from there. And hence, it's more difficult really for the government to say it is untouched by the fallout of the indictments on the Adani Group. If the trial proceeds in the US, it also puts a cloud over India's own legal and regulatory mechanisms on dealing with corruption internally. And that will raise questions about what steps the government is going to take to improve this situation. Fourthly, while these cases are about alleged corruption and coercion inside India, other governments, other countries, especially where governments have changed, may now open inquiries into the nature of projects done by Indian companies with their predecessors as well. So it's a precedent that India would like to avoid. So what's Worldview's take? For years, India's foreign policy has been fueled by its economic progress and the capacity of Indian companies to carry out international projects. It is futile to assume that the charges brought against a major Indian company by a major global power will have no impact on India's image or its global economic policies. While there's no question that the US actions indicate a considerable overreach, they fall within America's laws, and India cannot expect multinational corporations to operate according to Indian laws here while not ensuring or at least supporting Indian companies to do the same abroad. There are some reading recommendations from you, some books I haven't spoken about in the past. One that I have called India's Moment, Changing Power Equations Around the World by Mohan Kumar, a former diplomat who really writes about India's growing economic prowess and what it means in the world and some of the challenges to it as well. Another is a biography called Gautam Adani, Reimagining Business in India and the World by R.N. Bhaskar. It looks at some of the controversies around Adani projects as well. The third is a brand new book, and I really sincerely hope you will read it. It's called The End of the Chinese Century, ? How Xi Jinping Lost the Belt and Road Initiative by Bertil Lintner. And it really gives some clues about how, despite having so much economic prowess and strength, China's reputational damage really, or the company's reputational damage, affected China's diplomacy. Fourth is one called The Great Tech Game, Shaping Geopolitics and the Destiny of Nations by Anirudh Suri. This is really about the tech business worldwide. A book called India's Development Diplomacy, Understanding Development Cooperation as a Tool for Strategic Engagement in South Asia. The title speaks for itself, by Urmi Tat. And then there's India's Trade Policy by Arvind Panagaria. This is on trade, not on investment, but it really looks at India's outlook economically worldwide. So I hope you find all of these useful, and do join us again here on Worldview from the team. Thanks for watching.